Okay, let's unpack this. When you hear Sharia law, what comes to mind? For many, it's a loaded term, right? Conjures strong images, strong opinions. But the reality is often way more nuanced and, frankly, utterly fascinating. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a stack of your sources that explore Islamization and the implementation of Sharia law across different nations. We'll be looking at its profound impact on societies, rights, even daily life.
Precisely. And what's fascinating here is how often the actual application of Sharia diverges, sometimes, dramatically from popular perception, or even its stated goals. We'll be connecting the dots between historical events, legal frameworks, and the very human stories of progress, reversal, and ongoing struggle. Our mission is really to cut through the noise, examine specific examples of implementation and impact, especially on human rights, women, and minorities, and explore the varied perspectives and controversies surrounding it to give you a clearer understanding.
Yeah, and we've got some incredible material here. I mean, from the rapid shifts of revolutions and military takeovers to today's really fiery online debates. You'll hear about everything from women protesting in Tehran streets to public amputations in Sudan,
Yeah.
and these very passionate arguments happening right now about what true Sharia even looks like.
Right.
So what does this all mean for understanding global legal and social dynamics? Okay, let's start with a stark before and after picture. Let's focus on Iran, 1979. Our sources highlight a nation that before the Islamic Revolution was on a deliberate path of modernization. What did that actually look like for its people, especially women?
Right. So prior to 79, Iran's leadership under the Shah was actively pushing this modern, Western-aligned vision. And this had pretty significant implications for women's status. They were encouraged to get an education mixed freely with men in public, in schools, and notably gain suffrage. That was back in 1963.
63.
Yeah. In fact, that same year, 6 women were elected to parliament, 2 appointed to the Senate. But this push for modernization wasn't universally accepted, not across all parts of Iranian society.
Okay. And that's where it gets really interesting, doesn't it? Because even before the revelation, the sources show clear signs of opposition. Like Ayatollah Khamenei, the future leader. He led protests against women voting.
He did. He actually compared women's suffrage to prostitution. That's a direct quote highlighted.
Yeah.
And the Shah himself, in his drive to modernize, maybe he went too far the other way, he outlawed the headscarf, the hijab, in public, insisted government employees wear Western clothes.
Okay, so that would cause friction.
Huge friction, yeah. Especially among older, more conservative Iranians, it fueled calls for a return to, quote, traditional values.
And then, boom, Khomeini comes to power.
And virtually overnight, those decades of advancements dramatically rolled back. His vision was a radical Islamic reconstruction of society, a purge of Western influences, which basically meant reverting to religious standards from, over 1,000 years ago.
So what did that mean practically for women who'd been professionals?
Professional women were fired en masse, encouraged to return to household duties. Family protection laws abolished. New laws came in, like the legal marrying age for women was lowered to 9.
9.
And the Islamic law of retribution was reinstated in 81. That made adultery punishable by stoning to death.
It's truly shocking. And the sources suggest many women initially supported Khomeini. They actually expected more rights.
They did. They'd been encouraged to take an active role in the revolution. So, yeah, the expectation was for expanded rights.
How did that promise just evaporate? What was the immediate reality?
Well, that expectation was quickly shattered. Every aspect of female life came under strict government control. Women needed a male relative to go out in public with proof of relationship, sex segregation everywhere, public transport, you name it. A woman's testimony in court. Legally reduced to half that of a man's.
Half.
Yeah. And there was even a special government agency, the Prevention of Vice and Enjoining of Virtue Center.
Yeah.
Its whole job was enforcing a strict dress code. No hair visible, even laughing too loudly was deemed immodest. Punishable.
But the women didn't just accept this.
No, not quietly. On March 8th, 1979, International Women's Day, over 100,000 women gathered in Tehran, protesting the compulsory chador, that's the full body covering, calling for their rights to be protected.
100,000? That's huge. What happened?
Violent suppression. The regime moved fast, eliminated women's organizations, enforced the chador, segregated public spaces, and dismissed nearly 24,000 women from their jobs.
24,000.
Yeah. The sources quote someone saying it effectively destroyed every gain made by women's rights workers in the previous 70 years, and then some.
It's so clear from Iran's story how fast things can flip, driven by political will. A powerful lesson, isn't it? how the very groups energized by a revolution, like women, can end up being the first casualties when the ideology shifts.
Absolutely. A stark example.
Okay, so Iran showed us that seismic shift of a revolution. But what about a more deliberate top-down implementation? For that, let's turn to Pakistan. A different kind of wave of Islamization under General Muhammad Zia-ul-Haq. That was 77 to 88, right?
That's right. It was a very conscious effort to weave Islamic practices and laws into what had been, a largely secular state.
So how did Zia approach this?
He made Islamization the absolute centerpiece of his administration. His goal was enforcing what he called Nizam-e-Mustafa, the rule of the Prophet. This meant setting up separate Sharia judicial courts, judging cases using Islamic doctrine. New criminal offenses were brought in adultery, fornication, along with severe hudud punishments. That's a specific category of penalties from the Quran and Hadith. We're talking whipping, amputation, stoning to death.
And these weren't just like threats on paper.
Oh no, they were implemented. The material shows for theft or robbery, the punishment could be amputation of a hand, or even a hand and a foot.
A hand and a foot.
For extramarital sex, zina, which covers both adultery and fornication, unmarried offenders faced 100 lashes. Married offenders could be stoned to death.
And what's truly harrowing, reading this, is how the system got weaponized, isn't it, against rape victims?
Yes, that's a devastating point in the sources. Thousands of rape victims ended up incarcerated for zina because their testimony as women wasn't admissible in these hard cases unless they had 4 male Muslim witnesses.
4 male witnesses for rape.
Exactly. So Pakistan's existing statutory rape law was effectively abolished. Girls as young as 12 were prosecuted under zina laws.
That's beyond belief. And it went beyond criminal law, too.
Oh, yes. Islamization seeped into many aspects of life. Blasphemy laws were amended, making derogatory remarks against Islamic figures punishable by prison, and eventually a mandatory death penalty for defiling the name of Muhammad.
Mandatory death penalty.
Yeah. And these laws have been highly controversial. Over 1,300 accusations between 1987 and 2014, mostly against non-Muslim minorities. And tragically, 62 people murdered just based on allegations since 1990, extrajudicially.
And economically, too. There was an impact.
The Zakat and Ushur ordinance. Mandatory annual taxes on savings and agricultural output, framed as charity, but it became a state-controlled system.
Did that go smoothly?
No, it sparked sectarian divisions. Shia Muslims protested and eventually got an exemption. Culturally, textbooks were overhauled. Religious schools, madrasas, got state funding, their numbers shot up. Critics argue this potentially stoked sectarian hatred.
So Zia's motivations. The sources mention personal piety, fulfilling Pakistan's identity as a Muslim state. But they also suggest a more cynical political angle, right? Using Islamization to consolidate his own power.
That's a key point, yeah. Critics definitely argue he manipulated Islam for political ends. To legitimize his martial law regime, sideline opponents. The legacy is complex. Some scholars call the changes marginal or cosmetic, like maybe the rhetoric was powerful, but the practical legal change was limited.
But others point to real consequences.
Exactly. Others highlight increased sectarian violence, and they talk about a great faith tradition being reduced to a system of punishments and persecution of minority groups. So maybe it wasn't just the laws themselves, but the symbolism, the fear they created, especially for minorities, that fundamentally changed society, even if some legal changes were cosmetic.
Right.
And even after Zia died, many laws hudud, the Ramadan ordinances, stayed. The Islamization process continued, often judge-led by the Sharia courts.
But despite all that controversy, public support in Pakistan, it seems high.
It does. A 2013 Pew poll showed 84% of Pakistanis favoring Sharia as official law. And a 2010 poll found 87% identifying as Muslims first, before their nationality. So it clearly resonates deeply for many.
Okay, so from Pakistan's deliberate implementation, let's pivot. Sudan. Here, we see a country with multiple shifts back and forth on Sharia. Let's start in September 1983. President Ghaffar Nimri introduces the September laws. What was the impact there?
Nimri's move was pretty dramatic, a sudden imposition, really. He declared himself the imam of the Sudanese Ummah, basically, the spiritual leader of all Muslims in Sudan, and he brought in hudud punishments, public flogging for drinking alcohol, amputations for theft. The sources mention these specifically.
Right, and he made quite a show of it, the alcohol dumping.
He did, banned European dancing, and famously ordered US $11 million worth of alcohol, just spectacularly dumped into the Blue Nile. A very public statement.
That's quite the image. But the sources indicate the reality wasn't celebratory for everyone. How did these September laws affect groups like the Christian population in the South? What were the human costs?
Absolutely. It massively alienated the predominantly Christian and animist population in southern Sudan. It ended a previous autonomy agreement they had and basically exacerbated the conflict, kicking off the Second Sudanese Civil War again in 1983.
So it directly fueled the Civil War.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the human cost of the laws themselves was severe.
Yeah.
Records show 300 people had limbs amputated for stealing property worth over just US $40.
$40.
And these amputations, often done publicly by untrained people, huge social stigma made it impossible to find work. And then there was the execution of Mahmoud Mohammed Taha in January 85, internationally condemned.
Who was he?
He led the Republican Brotherhood. He advocated for gender equality, opposed these Islamic penal codes. So he was executed for apostasy, leaving Islam, and sedition. It sent a chilling message about defying the new legal framework.
But Nimri was ousted in 85, right? Did the laws go away then?
They were frozen temporarily, but then Omar al-Bashir seized power in 89 and they were reinstated.
Okay, so under al-Bashir, what did that mean for ordinary Sudanese people, particularly women, minorities?
Well, the 1991 Sudanese Criminal Act brought back the hudud punishments. So 40 lashes for a Muslim drinking alcohol, 20 for a Christian, shows the distinction made.
Right.
Women were told to dress modestly, wear head coverings, enforced by the public order police. There are documented cases of women being lashed just for wearing jeans.
Lashed for wearing jeans.
Apostasy still carried the death penalty. Christians in the North faced discrimination, things like mandatory Islam study in schools, and amputation sentences for theft continued. There are documented cases as recently as 2023.
It's hard to grasp the scale of that kind of social control and suffering. The sources paint such a grim picture. But they also show a more recent, really historic turn for Sudan, 2020. The transitional government made a huge move.
They did. Responding to the street protests that kicked al-Bashir out in 2019, the transitional government made really significant changes. They removed Islam as the official state religion, abolished the death penalty for apostasy for leaving Islam.
That's massive.
Huge. It was part of a peace deal with rebel groups, calling for a democracy based on the principle of separation of religion and state.
Is it settled now?
Well, many are cautiously optimistic. But NGOs still point out issues. Blasphemy laws, public decency laws are still on the books. Problems with church registration, confiscated properties, and predictably, Islamist groups loyal to al-Bashir are challenging these changes. So the debate is definitely not over.
Okay, let's bring this right up to the present day. Somalia. We looked at this fascinating Reddit thread you shared. The question, should Somalia be a Sharia-run country? Would you support it? And wow, it really captures the passionate arguments we see globally about religious law.
It really does. You see clear sides forming. On one hand, proponents argue for the historical success of Islamic governance. They point to examples like the Umayyad Caliphate, various Somali sultanates, claiming Somalia was actually richest when it followed Sharia.
So a return to a perceived golden age.
Kind of. They believe no better rule than the rule of Allah exists. They argue Sharia would protect religion, life, wealth, sanity, honor, drastically cut crime. Some even point to al-Shabaab-controlled areas for having low crime rates, though they're quick to say they don't support al-Shabaab's extremism, just making a point about order.
Okay.
And they see Sharia as a path to unity, something that could crush tribalism, put Muslims first before Somalis.
But then you have the other side. Strong counterarguments, lots of concerns.
Definitely. Skeptics immediately ask, has Sharia really worked well in any modern country? They bring up Afghanistan under the Taliban economic collapse, women's rights suppression.
And there's this accusation of hypocrisy, right?
Yeah, that comes up a lot. People pointing out that many advocating for strict Sharia in Somalia are actually living comfortably in Western democracies, enjoying freedoms they likely wouldn't have under the system they're promoting.
And the core issue seems to be interpretation.
Exactly. That's crucial. Critics argue Sharia isn't an exact science. It's interpreted by fallible humans, often based on centuries-old scholarship that hasn't adapted to modern life.
Which leads to human rights concerns.
Prominently. Questions about harsh punishments, women's rights, inheritance, marriage, divorce, leadership roles, the treatment of non-Muslim minorities. Some users even bring up specific verses or historical practices they claim allow for things like slavery, marital rape, domestic violence.
Though those interpretations are fiercely disputed by others in the same thread, it's important to note.
Absolutely. Very contested.
The economic arguments are interesting too. It's not straightforward.
Not at all. Some believe strict Sharia finance rules avoiding debt Interest would bring independence, stability. But others point out that, wealthy Sharia-led countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, they actively participate in the global financial system, including using things like interest, which some strict interpretations would forbid, so it's complex. Finding that balance between principles and pragmatism.
It really seems to boil down to a profound tension within Somali society itself.
It does. You see many in the thread arguing for secular democracy, saying it's the only way past tribalism and corruption, emphasizing religion and state should be separated. But then others are just as convinced. Only a return to Allah's law can save the country from what they see as a shit government and stupid tribal mentality. That's direct language from the thread.
Yeah.
And even the history is debated. Was Islam always integrated with Somali customary law, the Iqsas, or is Sharia as a legal system a later import, something invented?
Yeah.
Deep historical, theological arguments there, too.
Wow. Okay, so from the rapid changes in revolutionary Iran through decades of state Islamization in Pakistan, Sudan's back and forth swings between strict Sharia and secularism, and these really intense live debates in Somalia. What an illuminating deep dive. We've really seen how implementing Sharia law in all its varied forms has profoundly reshaped nations, reshaped lives, often with dramatic consequences for human rights, haven't we? Especially for women and minorities.
We certainly have, and it raises such an important point. As we've seen, Sharia isn't the single monolithic thing, is it? It's really a spectrum of interpretations, applications, constantly debated, contested, even within Muslim communities themselves. Every society is grappling with its own history, its political motivations, the evolving global ideas about human rights. It's just a reminder, isn't it, that beneath those broad headlines, there are always intricate details and deeply personal impacts.
Absolutely. So as you reflect on all this, maybe consider this, a final provocative thought. In a world where traditions are, deeply cherished, but societies are also constantly evolving, how do nations actually find that balance between historical religious texts, these diverse modern interpretations, and that universal aspiration we all share for justice, for freedom, and for human dignity for all their people? Something to think about.